This is part 2 of the Free Response Test B practice test for Chapter 5. And our next problem, number 15, asks us to ask Jessie used 2 3/4 cups of flour to make dinner rolls, and we have to write the fraction that shows how many quarter cups she has. So she didn't have a whole cup, she just had these quarter cups. And we had to figure out how many of those she had to use in order to make 2 3/4 cups. And so what we can do on this problem is just take that 2 3/4, and then we're going to change it to an improper fraction. That'll tell me how many quarter cups she has. So we'll take that 2, multiply it by the 4, and add the 3, and then it's over 4, because that's the number of quarter cups. And so the whole is the quarter cup, but the part represents the numerator of this fraction. And so when we go ahead and do that work, we have 2 times 4 is 8, plus 3 gives me 11. So that means I have 11 quarter cups in order to make that recipe for dinner rolls. And then it says we're supposed to write the decimal that is equivalent to this 5/8. So when we do this, we just divide, but remember that top dog goes in the doghouse, and so we've got the 5 goes inside that fraction bracket. 8 doesn't go into 5, so we add a 0, bring the decimal up. 8 goes into 56 times, and when we do that multiplication, we get 48. We subtract, we end up with 2 left over. Bring down a 0, and then do division again. 8 into 20 goes 2 times. Makes 16, we subtract, we get a 4 left over. Bring down a 0, and then do 8 into 40. And that finishes off the problem there. So the decimal equivalent is going to be 625 thousandths. Moving on to the next one, it says write 85 hundredths as a fraction in simplest form. Well, if you can read the number, you can write it as a fraction. So what you do is you read the last digit's place value. This is in the hundredths place. And so you just read the number 85 over 100, and then we take out a common factor. So the common factor between 85 and 100 is 5. And so when we do that division, 5 goes into the 8 one time with 3 left over. 5 goes into 35 7 times, so 5 goes into 85 17 times. 5 goes into 100 20 times, and that's the simplified form. Now we got to write 2/5 as a decimal, so same sort of thing as number 16. Remember the top dog goes in the doghouse, and we have 5 into 2. 5 doesn't go into 2, so we add a 0. Add that decimal point, bring it straight up, and 5 into 20 goes in there 4 times evenly. That makes 20, so we have a remainder of 0. That means we've terminated that decimal. It's done. 4/10 is the answer there. Number 19 asks, Michelle bought 80 trading cards. So she has 80 cards, and this is a total. And so the total represents the whole when we're dealing with a fraction. So 36 of those cards are sports cards. We're supposed to write the decimal that shows how many cards were sports cards. So when we write this fraction, it would be 36, which is our part. So part of those are sports cards. So 36 over 80. And before I tried to reduce this fraction, what I would do is take out a common factor, make the problem a little bit easier on myself. So I'm going to divide by 4, and that makes 9 over 20. And then from there, it's a little bit easier. See, it would be easy to figure out the decimal form. Well, you just divide. And so we can go ahead and put that top dog in the doghouse, add that decimal point in the 0, and 20 goes into 90. Well, how many times? Well, 20 goes into 94 times, and that makes 8. 80. And so we end up with 10 left over. Add that 0. 20 goes into 100 5 times evenly. That makes 100. So we're done. And so there it is, 45 hundredths. Another way to do that, though, since we could make the denominator 100 fairly easily with this fraction here. If I multiplied that by 5 over 5, that would give me 45 over 100. And that is the same thing as reading it off as a decimal, 45 hundredths. Another way to do the same problem. Here it says, which number is greatest? So we've got to either change them all to fractions or all to decimals. It would be easier to change these numbers to decimals, so let's do that. 6/10. Well, that's just 0.6. 6 in the tenths place. So all we have to really do is figure out the 9/12 as a decimal. So let's go ahead and do that. 12 into 9. Well, it doesn't go into 9, so we add the decimal point. Do 12 into 90, and we'll try an 8. That makes 96. That's too big, so let's go with the next number smaller. That makes 7, and that makes 84. And do the subtraction, I got 60. So 12 goes into the 60. We have 5 times evenly. So there it is. We have 75 hundredths. So we know this is 0.75. We know this one's 0.6, so now when we compare, we want to look at the place value. So we look at the tenths place to start with. There's a 6, a 7, a 7, and a 7. So we can take off the 6 because that's smaller than those other place values. So now we're looking at the hundredths place. This one's 0, and this one's 5, which is bigger than 0, so we can cross this one off. And then 5 is bigger than 2, so we can cross this one off. So this is the largest one, the greatest, 9/12. Here it asks us write the set of fractions in order from least to greatest. So what we need to do is come up with a common denominator. So I'm going to break these numbers down a bit, and I see the common factor between these is 2, at least between the 12 and the 10. So I'm going to break it down this way. We've got 11. And here we have 2 and 5. So the greatest common factor is going to have a 2, a 6 to make the 12. We need to use a 5 to make 10, and then an 11. And so this will help us figure out what to multiply each by. So I'm going to take that 7/10, and I'm going to multiply it. Now look at the 10 here. We have 2 and 5, so it needs a 6 and an 11. And so we multiply it by 66. So when we do that work, we go ahead and multiply those numbers. Let's see here, that makes a 42. Carry the 4, that makes 42 once more, plus 4 makes 46, and that's over 660. So that's that number, and let's take a look at the next one here. So we have 8/11, and so when I look at 11, I need to have all of these numbers multiplied. So this makes 10 times 6 makes 60. And so I multiply those and get another 660 in the denominator, and 60 times 8 makes 480. And the last one was 7/10. Oops, I did 7/10, so it's going to be the 7/12, or 10/12. So let's write that one down, 10/12. And we have 2 and 6. That makes the 12, so we'll need the 5 and the 11, which makes 55. You need to multiply that by the 10/12. So I know the denominator makes 660, and the numerator, well, that makes 550, 55 times by 10. So now I need to see which one's the smallest. Well, the smallest was this number, that 10/12, because, I'm sorry, that's the biggest one, because that's at 550. So I need to look at the numerators here, and when I look at these numerators, this one's the smallest numerator, right here, 462. So 7/10 is the smallest one. Then the next biggest one would be this one here, that the numerator is the second largest, so 480. So this is the next one. So this was number 1. It's the smallest. Number 2, which was 8/11. And the largest one is this one here. 550 is bigger than those two numerators, so 10/12. That is the largest. And then the next problem asks us to use these symbols, either a less than or greater than symbol, to see which one's the biggest one. So we look at place values. Here's the tenths. They both have 0, so that's the same so far. Then we go to the hundredths. See, this one's 0, this one's 8. This one is larger. And so that tells us this number is larger than the other. So 8/100ths is larger than 8/1000ths. And the last one, it says order the numbers 6/10ths, 4/5ths, and 5/100ths from least to greatest by graphing them on the number line. So let's go ahead, and we know that 1/2 is the same as 0.5. So this is 5/10ths here, so 0.6. Well, if we look at the graph, the intervals, if this is 1/10, 2/10, 3/10, 4/10, yes, this would be 5/10. So they're going by tenths. So 6/10 would be right here, right? Just to the right of the 1/2, because 1/2 is 5/10. And the 4/5. Well, if I change 4/5 to a decimal, the top dog in the doghouse, do the division, that makes 0.8. So I need, here's 0.6, 0.7, 0.8. So this would be where 4/5 is. And then I have one more, 5 hundredths. Well, this number here is in between 0 and 0.10. So see how 5 is in between 0 and 10. So 5 hundredths is in between 0 and 1/10. So here's 0, here's 1/10. So right here would be 5 hundredths. Well, those are the types of problems that you're going to see on this chapter test. So good luck.